Welcome to another episode of the Cassels Cast. My name's Eamon Cassels. Joining the show today is going to be Elie Deglaoui and Bruce Veliz. Together, we're going to go over 15 mock trades that we could potentially see happening before this NBA trade deadline. We each came up with 5 trades, and we're going to go over them together. Before wrapping up with our thoughts on the Chris Paul situation, you can see the jersey behind me. I'm a big CP fan. Bruce is also a really big CP3 fan. So we had to share some of our thoughts on that. Emotional close to the show, I would say. Really emotional stuff. But yeah, let's just get into the episode. Should be a ton of fun. All right, joining the show now is Elie Deglaoui and Bruce Velez. How you doing today?
All right, I appreciate you having us on again.
Doing great. Always a blast to be back on the podcast. And this one's going to be a fun one, so I'm very excited.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're gonna start by going over our mock trades. We each created 5 mock trades for just some of the hottest names that could be on the move. So yeah, who you guys got to start off, and we're gonna go over our specific trades, and then we're gonna sort of give our thoughts on what the other person came up with.
I got to remember the exact 4 I had. So, Bruce, if you want to go first.
All right. I got you. So we got 5 trades, and I'll start off with probably my weakest one here, which is just a 1-for-1 swap, but something that we kind of talked about. And one of the teams that we kind of analyzed and brought down players was the Kings, because they have an abysmal team, and we kind of all know that. So the Kings going to be blowing some stuff up. Eamon was kind of right on his predictions from earlier on in the season of doing so. So I got them trading DeMar DeRozan, that was my king, and I have them sending him to the Clippers for John. Now, Clippers are going to save some money here, take on DeRozan. He's got that partial guarantee for his contract next year, adding some offense, while the Kings get some very needed defense and rebounding in John Collins. They obviously are taking on an expiring contract, so next year we'll have $27 million and kind of freed up space there to do whatever their hearts contend. What's your kind of thoughts on that trade?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this is a common one because the Clippers have expressed openly interest in DeMar. I think it kind of makes sense. They're in a desperate spot. And yeah, I mean, this would be, I think, I don't know. I'd like to think that DeMar's value is a little bit higher than expiring contract, but it's probably not because he's kind of a weird fit. He's not like an elite defender, not a great 3-point shooter, little older, has a couple of years left on his deal. So I do think it makes sense for both sides. If I had to say, I think I like it a little more for the Clippers just because it's like, it's a no risk sort of move, and you're adding a player who could sort of get you back into that playoff contention because you don't have your pick. You're a complete joke of a franchise. We're going to talk about that later. So they really need something like this. So I do like it a little bit more for the Clippers, personally.
Actually think I kind of agree because the Clippers are in such a weird spot right now where they can't really tank and they kind of put themselves in a win now situation, which they're not doing. And at this point, they're not going to do unless they make some sort of big move. And I mean, DeMar DeRozan, it kind of feels like he's been in this weird situation over the last few years where it's pretty obvious that he can still play, he still has value, but the fit for him is kind of hard to figure out at this point in his career. And but I do feel like if there's one team that could maybe benefit from getting a guy like DeMar DeRozan, it is the Clippers. We all know about his California ties anyway. He doesn't have to move far from Sacramento to LA. I think I would agree. The Clippers probably make out better in this trade, or at least this is a trade worth doing to try and salvage whatever's left of this season.
100%. I feel like the Clippers kind of need that little bit of a juice, so adding a guy like DeRozan can help them a little bit more. I feel like they've had some issues with their front court. Brook Lopez hasn't been the greatest signing. Obviously, Zubac not having his greatest numbers comparative to last year, but I do think, kind of losing some of that front court help and adding some much needed offense, specifically with Bradley Beal going down, Kawhi Leonard, missing some games here and there would be kind of necessary. And like you guys mentioned, there's a lot of teams where the fit is kind of weird, but for the Clippers, not needing to tank, kind of needing to be a little bit better, I feel like this is a good, happy solution for both sides.
Most definitely. Yili, do you have your trades up?
I do. So, am I revealing the 5 I'm doing, or am I going one by one? What do we think's
One
better?
by one, one by one. So Bruce gives one, you give one, then I go, and then yeah, just
Let's
big
do it.
snake draft kind of thing.
All right, let's do it. So I got the man that everybody has been putting in trade rumors for years. Well, I guess there's a few of them. Mine's Trae Young. That's gonna be the first guy I'm discussing, and I really thought about it with Trae Young. And problem with Trae Young is he's obviously a very talented player. He's a fantastic scorer, fantastic shooter, great facilitator, playmaker, passer, all of that. Exactly what you want out of a point guard in the modern era. But the main problem with Trae Young, as everybody will know, is his defense. He has virtually no defensive skill. He gets bullied a lot. He ball watches a lot. He's not big enough to really be any type of physical threat to anybody. So I figured if you're gonna not really provide much defense anyway, you might as well go to a team where you can be just you can make up one of the best offensive duos in the league. Bruce, you're gonna maybe like this one or hate this one. I got Trae Young to Phoenix for Jalen Green and Royce O'Neal. Do I think this is a good trade? I don't know. But from Atlanta's perspective, they get Jalen Green, who's another guy that can kind of come in and provide at least a little bit more defensive value and a little bit more defensive upside. And with Royce O'Neal, I don't think Phoenix would trade him, but hypothetically, you have to give up something else to get something. Royce O'Neal does have, not only does he provide defense and depth and all of that, but he also does have that connection with Quinn Snyder from their time in Utah together. Despite him being in trade rumors, finding a real trade for Trae was actually very difficult. I at least feel like with Phoenix, there is some idea here where, yeah, the defense isn't going to be good, but Jordan Ott has proven that he can be a really good defensive coach. I mean, he clearly has the eye for it and the mind for it. It's worked out pretty well. They played pesky and all of that. And the idea of Trae Young with Devin Booker could be very appealing. So that's kind of the one that I came up with.
So I actually really like that move for the Phoenix Suns. I've heard a lot about Trae Young's kind of trade value over the last couple of weeks, and I feel like he doesn't really have much trade value. So I feel like a deal revolving around Jalen Green and Royce O'Neal honestly wouldn't be too much for the Suns to give up. And like you mentioned, they've been playing virtually without Jalen Green this whole entire year. They only had him for that one game, maybe one and a quarter before he then re-aggravated himself. And they've been sufficient enough on the offensive end with kind of those some big time players. I also think Royce O'Neal, not to mention getting that relationship with Quinn Snyder back, but kind of into that wing room with guys like Jalen Johnson, Zachary Rizache kind of complements them from that 3 points kind of scoring wing, something that they kind of could need as well. So I do like that. Jalen Green's someone that I've recently talked about to the Hawks in the past. Similar to him and Bradley Beal, I think if you're going to move off of Trae Young and you're going to still have Dyson Daniels be that playmaker and that defensive guard, you still need a little bit of an offensive punch, and I think Green can kind of bring that attacking the lane. I personally wouldn't hate this trade if I were the Phoenix Suns. I think that some of their fans might be like a little bit not really wanting to shake things up to where maybe this is where they don't do the trade, but I think that if you're the Suns and this offer was presented in front of you, you kind of have to strike, because adding a guy like Trae Young to Devin Booker could really level up that offense, and who knows what a piece like Trae Young could get you in return down the line, because he's still a valuable asset as well.
Yeah, I definitely really like this for the Suns, honestly. We haven't seen the Jalen Green and Devin Booker backcourt pairing outside of, I believe, just like 1.5 games. So it's sort of unfair to like say that it's a bad fit, but I was never super high on the fit personally. And the Suns have been awesome this season. So I could see them trying to make a move. And I mean, I think just Trae Young and Devin Booker makes a lot of sense on paper. So I'm definitely a fan of it for the Suns. I could see this moving the needle a little bit to where they're a legit playoff team. So yeah, I really like this for the Suns. For the Hawks, I don't. It's very tough, and we have the 3 point guards. I think all of us took a different one. Trae Young, John, LaMelo, who are all like heavily involved in trade rumors, and their value is also super unclear. So it's really hard to find a trade for them. And some people are even saying that, hey, these guys are negative assets. If there's one guy I want, it's Trae Young. I think he's proven the most throughout his career. He has the least amount of injury concerns. And yeah, I mean, he's super heliocentric, so he is a little bit harder to like build around in some ways, but I think he's easier to build around than a LaMelo or a Ja. So overall, I'm like the highest on Trae Young, and just I don't know. I'm not a huge Jalen Green guy, so just seeing, I understand it is probably a possibility. I would have to pass on it from the Hawks, though. I don't love Jalen Green, to be honest, and I don't love his fit with this Hawks team. Royce O'Neal, really solid role player, but I just hope you get a little bit more back from Trae. But who knows? Because the contract situation, because the fit concerns, I could see this being a realistic package. But like at first glance, I'd just have to like pass on it from the Hawks. All right, get into my first trade. Honestly, this one isn't like the craziest idea in the world. I think a lot of people are mocking up similar trades for this guy. We're going to be talking about Anthony Davis. Personally, I think the most likely scenario is that he just stays in Dallas. It's just hard to find the right package for him. You know, with the Mavs not owning their first round picks outside of this year, I don't think it's the best idea in the world to like fully lean into a rebuild. With that being said, I feel like this is just like the most obvious suitor that everyone's linking him to. And after thinking about it, trying to send him over to different teams, I just kept going back to the Bulls. There was a report that came out this week where it was they're looking for their Pascal Siakam next to Josh Giddey, and Davis just seems like such an obvious player. I don't like love it for either team, but it almost makes too much sense. So the trade I came up with is Patrick Williams, albatross of a contract, Nikola Vucevic, expiring deal, solid player. Kobe White, you get a legit point guard. Another expiring contract, but I would think the Mavericks would be able to re-sign him. And then 3 first-round picks. I think a lot of people are underestimated Davis's trade value a little bit, so I wanted to give them a little bit more pick compensation than I've been seeing in some of these other trades. Another thing I'd like to note is like with these 3 first-round picks, it's like 2 for Davis, also 1 to take on that Pat Will contract because it's just that terrible. So yeah, what do you guys think of this trade? Is it fair value? What do you think of the fit with Davis in Chicago as well?
I personally like the fit of Davis in Chicago, even though I don't really think it's the right move for them. But it is the Chicago Bulls. They are a fraudulent front office, and they want to win. That is something they want to do. So I could very well see the Chicago Bulls going and making this deal. Obviously, Anthony Davis has the hometown ties to Chicago, kind of bringing him back. Would be a good story for the Bulls and a little bit of a weakened Eastern Conference, maybe to make a run or kind of set themselves up for a run in the future. The package, though, like you mentioned, I don't think is too out. I think 3 first-round picks is pretty fair, especially 2 for Davis. I don't think that we know that he was obviously traded for Luka with no first-round picks, but we have a new GM for Dallas. It's no longer Nico Harrison. So hopefully this new GM can actually make some smart trades, get a little bit better value for Davis than they got in that Luka deal. And I mean, got off the position. Might as well take the risk, right? If I'm getting off Anthony Davis's contract, if it doesn't work, oh well, we're going to be bad anyways. But if he is able to find himself on that team and be, a switchable defender and actually be viable for them, then hey, you got a diamond in the rough. So for the Dallas Mavericks, ultimately, I think just getting off Anthony Davis and getting away from that headache is something they need to do. So I would do this if I were them. If I were the Bulls, I would do it as well, just because I'm a fraudulent front office and that's the move I'm going to make. But hey, that's just kind of where I stand.
Yeah, kind of like you mentioned, David. I've gone back and forth on this too. More so in the sense of, do I think the Mavericks should trade Anthony Davis? And if they do, who's a good fit for him? I wholeheartedly believe if he's going to get traded, it's Chicago. They need him. They need to upgrade their front court. We've seen that they can compete. It's starting to look like that beginning with 6-1 start I believe they had is more of a fluke. But it's pretty clear that they can play. Josh Giddey has still taken that next step. I mean, Vucevic was looking like clutch player of the year to begin the year. I mean, they obviously have talent and they have what it takes, I think, especially in this wide open Eastern Conference, to be good. And they love their guys from Chicago. Matas Muzelis is from Chicago. I forgot his name. Carter is from Chicago, and I believe they have somebody else from Chicago too. So it's just a matter of they clearly like the home ties, and I do think Anthony Davis moves the needle for them. I also feel like from Dallas's perspective, I've gone back and forth on it a lot because I initially thought 100% they have to trade Anthony Davis because it's not fair to him. He didn't ask to be traded for Luka Doncic, but that's the reality of it. And I mean, it might be easier for me to say because I'm not a Mavericks fan, but I feel like Mavericks fans are never really going to like commit to Anthony Davis like that. They're never really going to bring him in like they did with Luka for that reason. Embrace him. That's what I'm trying to say. I feel like they're never really going to embrace him. So I felt like a trade was necessary. But Dallas is starting to figure some things out. Ryan Nembhard looks like not even a steal because he wasn't drafted. He looks like that GTA 5 jewelry heist. Like that's what he looks like. You know what I mean? He looks incredible. Looks like they may have their point guard in the future. Cooper Flag is really starting to figure things out. Klay Thompson's kind of turning back the clock a little bit. I guess I say all that to say, because I just realized how much I rambled. For this trade, I do think it makes sense, though. More so from Chicago's perspective, because they do need to upgrade their front court. And obviously, if you get a guy like Anthony Davis in return, trading Patrick Williams and trading Vucevic won't be much of a problem. I think Chicago makes out better in this deal than Dallas does. But I also do like the idea of Kobe White in Dallas, and obviously you get the trade capital in return too. So I would give it to Chicago, but I could see this happening for both teams.
Yeah, for sure. Almost all of my trades, I feel like I'm gonna say this about. I don't really love it for either team, but I could like kind of see it happening, and you can like kind of talk yourself into it either way. But yeah, I feel like you guys said, if there is a team that trades for AD, it's probably gonna be the Bulls. Let's be honest. But yeah, Bruce, what's your next trade?
So my next trade is going to be involving someone that we all watch on the daily because it is involving someone from our favorite team. That is right, the Boston Celtics. And if you know who that is, when we're talking about the Celtics, you know who I'm mentioning in a trade. It's going to be Anfernee Simons, and we're going to be talking about him. And there's been some rumblings about Anfernee Simons, especially recently with some other teams, but I went and talked to a team that the Celtics had apparently talked to in the past with Anfernee Simons and a player that they especially liked from them as well. And that is going to be the Brooklyn Nets. So they're going to be trading away Anfernee Simons over there. They're going to be taking on that expiring contract. The Celtics in return are going to be taking back two salaries. They're going to be taking back Terrence Mann and Day'Ron Sharpe. They were interested in Day'Ron Sharpe. That was some reporting from the earlier on in the season, or from this season, from the off season that we got from some tidbits from. And Sharp, I think, could be a solid center that they could go out and add. It doesn't really take too much from Kata. He can kind of be in that competition with him. He's not going to, take that starting spot away, maybe from a guy like, Nicholas Claxton, who some Celtics fans have linked through with the Nets for an Anfernee Simons trade, or maybe an Ivica Zubac from the Clippers, where some people have mocked some trades. I think Sharp can still add into that room and still be beneficial, but not take too much from Kata. And then you get the, the expiring, or not the expiring, but the 2-year contract of Terrence Mann, one that wasn't flipped to you. You got Georges Niang in the Kristaps deal, but you still end up getting that Terrence Mann contract. He just goes on in the wing, kind of competes with Sam Hauser, adds some, more wing depth with Jason Tatum being out this year, and could be, an expiring contract that you could use a draft asset or a young piece to attach to flip on in the offseason to either clear that salary space or to get another upgrade as well.
I like that a lot. Not to mention that Terrence Mann does have Massachusetts ties. I believe he was born in Lowell or grew up in Lowell or something like that. He can play. He's somebody that if you're going to trade Anfernee Simons, you kind of need another bench guard, like with kind of that skill set, somebody who can score and just kind of be almost like I wouldn't call him a microwave, but just somebody who can kind of be a little bit of a spark plug, I guess, off the bench. I feel like I like this more for Brooklyn, only because I am a lot higher on Anfernee Simons than I think a lot of other people are. He's streaky, and we've seen that firsthand. His defense, I still think he's a better defender than maybe people initially thought, but he looks lost a lot of the time. He ball watches a lot. He can still get bullied a lot. I don't think Anfernee Simons is ever going to be a good defender, but I also don't think that's why teams roster him in the first place. But I do like this more for Brooklyn. I mean, you guys know how I feel about Michael Porter Jr. That's my young goat. So pairing the two of them together can make for some if they keep Cam Thomas, that can make for some really fun basketball. Fortunately for Brooklyn, they're not trying to win, so I think this trade works out better for them than it does for Boston. But they do need more center depth, and I think that's where Day'Ron Sharpe kind of comes in. I would still give it to Brooklyn just because I do like Anfernee Simons more than the other two, even combined. But I could see Boston doing this because I think they're going to move on from him anyway.
Yeah, for sure. This is one I could like totally see happening. I feel like the Nets have been linked to Simons because they have that extra cap space. And the expiring deal is definitely appealing for them. And then like just cap wise for the Celtics, if I'm not mistaken, I think this would free up some extra cap space, which would be another advantage. I do like Sharp. Shout out UNC. I feel like he could be a really nice backup center, and the Celtics really do need a backup center behind Kata. Kata's been awesome, but they really haven't found that like clear backup guy. Going to a lot of small ball lineups. Garza looked like he was going to be that for a second, but he's like kind of fallen out of the rotation. Boucher hasn't done much. Tillman hasn't done much. Amari Williams, I kind of like him, but he's a second round pick. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Man, he's fine. I guess he can play a little bit of minutes. I wouldn't expect him to like crack the rotation, to be honest. But yeah, Simons, I feel like he is going to be on the move most likely. I thought he was going to be doing a little bit more for this team. He just doesn't have a very consistent role. I don't think Joe Mazzulla likes him very much, personally. But yeah, I think this makes sense for both teams. Like the Celtics fan in me wants to be like, what would it take to get Claxton? And I'd like to get your guys' perspective, but I don't think it's like that unrealistic. Like, what if it's like Simons and a first? I think their contracts are pretty similar. Do you guys think that could potentially be enough? Would there need to be more from the Celtics side? And I do think like Brooklyn wise, it does sort of make sense to like completely bottom out and try to get a pick, which with this trade, that doesn't really do it as much for you as like trading away Claxton. But at the same time, Claxton's looked really good and he's taken a lot of steps up, especially as a passer. So you might not want to get rid of him. But yeah, do you guys think there's a chance that they could like potentially get Claxton in this or no?
I think there's always a chance. I just think that if they had to give up a first or had to give up more for Claxton, they might be a little bit more resentful just because they don't know necessarily what they're going to be this season. I feel like more in the offseason when I know there's more teams bidding, but there's more access to restructure a roster or have guys over the limit or under the limit and more flexibility with the aprons and stuff like that. I feel like it's a little bit more easier for them to acquire a guy like Claxton. So maybe that's something, if they have these conversations, nothing really stems, but maybe in the off season that's something they can kind of do, then that's something I'd be interested in. But I wouldn't say it's definitely out of reach. I just don't know if the Celtics are willing to give up necessarily what it's going to take for him for this season. But I could be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I think Nick Claxton would be a really good fit in Boston too. One of the concerns I kind of had with Kata being the center was that he can't stretch the floor, but it's looking like that doesn't really matter in this iteration of the Celtics roster. So I think Claxton, in theory, would be a really good fit. I feel like there would be more motivation from Boston's side to make this trade happen, only because Nick Claxton is still he's still young. I mean, he's not a prospect anymore, but he still has upside. He still has room to develop. And I feel like this is a trade that the Celtics would benefit from more than Brooklyn. So I'm all for it. But yeah, I could potentially see it happening, especially because, like I said, Anfernee Simons is good. I think I do agree with the idea that maybe he should be doing more than he is. I mean, at the end of the day, we still traded Drew Holiday to get him, and it just kind of feels like we would have been better off just doing the salary dump and that was it. Because as much as I do like Simons in theory, he hasn't really lived up to it, to that hype when we traded for him. So I think if we could trade him to maybe get Claxton, I think that would be potentially a win-win. But I feel like that would benefit Boston a lot more than it would benefit Brooklyn.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense, and I think that's a good way to look at it. That was definitely just me trying to put that Celtics fan cap on and just see like, is there a way? Because I know Bruce, you mentioned it before, but yeah, I mean, I think that first trade that Bruce threw out is probably a little bit more realistic. But yeah, I mean, who knows? Yeah, what's your next trade, Elie?
So I hope you guys can forgive me. I half lied to you because once I find it, I have another Trae Young trade.
Let's call it.
Except it's disguised as a Lauri Markkanen trade. So the trade I have is Trae Young and Kristaps Porzingis to Atlanta, or not to Atlanta, to Utah for Lauri Markkanen and Yusuf Nurkic. I more so put Nurkic in just for the contracts to work out, but he is on an expiring contract anyway. One of the reasons that I think trading Porzingis is beneficial for Atlanta is because they already have some nice young centers. I mean, I'm a big fan of Okongwu. Mo Gay's really coming into his own and looks like a legitimate asset for them. And Kristaps Porzingis, as much as I think we all love what he can bring, and obviously we'll always appreciate, him being a part of that championship team in 2024. His availability's only gotten worse. He's missed like 5 straight games or something like that because of an illness. And even when he plays, they don't know what version of Porzingis they're getting. He's on an expiring contract. Nurkic is on an expiring contract. But it's really about Trae for Lowry. This Hawks team can compete without Trae Young. I don't know if they're better without Trae Young. Like I've seen a lot of people kind of have that because Trae Young is such a liability defensively. But they can compete without Trae Young. And I feel like adding a guy like Lauri Markkanen to just add another scorer to that starting lineup. And I think he would be a really good fit next to their centers. Like I said, Okongwu and Mo Gay. I think he'd be an incredible fit alongside them. They'd be able to complement each other very well. And then from Utah's perspective, I mean, Kristaps Porzingis, he's got some ties there because of Danny Ainge, or not Danny Ainge, Austin Ainge, and Will Hardy as well. So I feel like that could be a good trade for them. And then Trae Young, I think the Jazz have some nice, young, talented pieces, but if they're going to try to move the needle and kind of work on up, I feel like this is a trade that might benefit them too.
Yeah, I like this one. I think I'm more interested if I'm the Hawks than I'm the Jazz, just because, like you mentioned, without Trae Young, they've been so successful. And in your last trade, you mentioned Royce O'Neal being a nice added piece. I think Lauri Markkanen is kind of just a better version of Royce O'Neal, not even just like off the ball, but with it on the ball, he's just going to be such a better creator with them, helping them create in the low post and working alongside some of those bigs. So I do like the fit of Lauri Markkanen going there, and I feel like Jusuf Nurkic, once again, kind of just be that center to really fill in for them as well. Zingis, he does have the interest of the Jazz as well. I believe they were the other team that were interested in him alongside the Celtics when they acquired him via trade. So I wouldn't be shocked if they were interested in him. Obviously, with his reluctantness to be available, it's been tough for him to kind of be worth that $30 million contract. So I feel like a team like Utah, it's not really going to matter for them that much, especially if they're tanking. Maybe could use it as a sign and trade possibility later on, similar to a guy like Trae Young. The one thing that I just think stops the Jazz from doing this trade is just because I don't think they want it to be a trade piece down the line or another possible sign and trade like Porzingis.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. I had never thought of like the idea of like Lauri with the Hawks that much or Trae Young with the Jazz. So it's definitely an interesting one. I kind of love the idea of Lauri in Atlanta though, and if I'm in Atlanta, I think this makes sense. Especially if you're looking to trade Trae. I think this is like the type of package that would make a little bit of sense for me. And I mean, Lauri with just their size, their length. I mean, they're also a pretty good shooting team too. It'd be super interesting. I think it'd be a really good fit. So I mean, I definitely really like this for Atlanta. For the Jazz, I think my thing is if I'm trading Markkanen, I would trade him for like a bunch of picks, which you can probably get like for I don't know. Their bar is very high. As we know with Danny Ainge, I think he's seeking like 4 or 5 first round picks and just really trying to rebuild further, especially with this draft class. And their pick is top 8 protected. So if I'm trading Lauri, my thought process is more so like let's make sure that we secure our pick instead of like let's keep trying to like surprise the NBA and like move into the play. And even though they have been rebuilding for a while, it's just like one more shot. I feel like they've been trying, especially like with AJ Debinsta. They like the owner and Danny Ainge, they like partially funded his NIL deal. It's like he just feels like such a Utah Jazz guy. I feel like they're just desperate for one of those top 3 picks. So I feel like if I'm trading Markkanen, it's to position myself for the draft. But yeah, we can move on to my next trade. I mean, I guess I'll go with the big kahuna here. It's Giannis, man. This has been a weird week for the Bucks, and I mean, Shams, I don't know like how significant his reports are. I feel like a little people are overreacting. He didn't request a trade yet. He's considering his future, which Shams has been saying for like the last 6 months. But it's something. It's something that he like deleted all his Bucks stuff after they lost to the Wizards. I think something could happen this deadline, so I think it's worth talking about. So yeah, and if they are trading Giannis, it's going to have to be a King's ransom. I just want to make this clear. I have a very significant package, and I think it's so ridiculous that the Knicks are being linked to him. Guys, the Knicks aren't fucking trading for Giannis. They can't. They don't have the assets to. Karl Anthony Towns in a first. That's not a fair deal for Giannis. He's a top 3 player in the world. So just had to get that out of the way. One team that does have the assets, though, and would be very, very overpowered if he went there, it's the San Antonio Spurs. So I got Giannis and Cole Anthony for De'Aaron Fox, Stephon Castle, Jeremy Shohane, 4 first-round picks, including 1 swap, 1 from the Kings in like 2031 off the top of my head. Extremely valuable. And the Bulls pick this year, if that doesn't convey whatever, it turns into another pick. I think this is like the type of deal that the Bucks would absolutely have to consider. Also think it's worth noting this deal can't get done until February because of Fox's trade restriction. But yeah, what do you guys think of like the idea of Giannis with the Spurs and then like just this package as a whole?
So I'd agree with you. I think this is probably the team that's most likely to trade for Giannis just because of all the assets they've had. And they specifically said that they didn't want to get involved in the Kevin Durant sweepstakes this offseason for another superstar like Giannis or something of that magnitude to be available. And I think this is kind of the package the Spurs have been waiting for. You pair Giannis up versus with Wembanyama, you have that dynamic duo. And ultimately you are giving up a lot, right? You're giving up Jeremy Sohan, who's a nice young piece. You're giving up Stephon Castle, the former rookie of the year. You're giving up 4 first-round picks. But if you're the San Antonio Spurs, you don't need all these first-round picks. You're going to run into yourself like the Oklahoma City Thunder, where you have 3 first-round picks and you have full roster spots, and you're into these tight kind of conclusions, especially when you're trying to develop around Victor Wembanyama. Obviously, it's nice to have those rookie-scale contracts, but I think kind of going in and making that move, specifically with how stacked the Western Conference is, I think if you add Giannis with Wemby right now, even if taking out De'Aaron Fox, that team could easily rival the Oklahoma City Thunder for the Western Conference Finals to make things more interesting. And I don't think it's giving up too much. If I'm the Bucks, I don't necessarily know if I want De'Aaron Fox. I know he kind of has to go to make the money work, maybe try to flip him to a third team because I don't necessarily know if that, or maybe try to get Dylan Harper if that's a possibility. I feel like that might be a little bit out of reach for the San Antonio Spurs to give up because I feel like they'd want him and Wemby to kind of take that next step for this team post the Giannis Wemby kind of Spurs. But if I'm the Bucks, I think this is the one deal that I'm going to get the Kings ransom from across the league. So this is the one team that I'm very, very interested in, regardless of the fact, because they have the best pieces for Giannis.
Honestly, I like this trade a lot for both teams. If I'm San Antonio, I'm doing this trade immediately. Giannis and Wemby is disgusting. That's an insane duo. And I just feel like, yeah, they would immediately, I think, jump up to call it at least a top 4 team in the West. I think hands down. Because I still would probably have, or not probably, I would have OKC ahead of them. And then I would probably have Denver and Houston ahead of them, but I think that's kind of where they can take that leap. I think the Spurs absolutely win this trade, and I also think Milwaukee gets a really good return, probably as good of a return as they're going to get. De'Aaron Fox, we talked about the last pod. He can play. Like I think he's kind of somewhat of an outcast, not outcast, but I think a lot of people are still kind of unsure about what his long-term role is in San Antonio because he's ahead of guys like Stephon Castle and Dylan Harper, and just kind of feels like if anything they should just trade him, get somebody else in return who can help, which I think this does. The only thing that I'm kind of, I don't know, concerned is the right word, but the only part that I'm kind of interested, I guess, to see play out is, let's say, because the only way I think the Bucks are trading Giannis is if he requests a trade. Like he has to request a trade, and it has to be, I think, like a Jimmy Butler type of situation where everybody knows he doesn't want to be there anymore. He's going to get traded. And so with that, the only thing I guess I'm a little bit interested in is how much leverage would Milwaukee have? Like hypothetically, would there be a way for San Antonio to be like, hey, we know Giannis doesn't want to be there anymore. We're not going to give you all these draft picks because you're not going to be able to send him anywhere else. So I guess that's kind of the only thing I'm interested in seeing. If we're talking about who wins this specific trade, I think it's San Antonio, but I think Milwaukee, all things considered, would be happy with this deal. But yeah, I think if San Antonio can get Giannis, that would be a game changer for the entire league.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's kind of unreal to think about like Giannis and Wemby together. And yeah, I do definitely agree, Ellie. Like, if a Giannis trade does happen, it's going to be because he requests out, whether that be before the deadline, this offseason, whatever. I just don't see the Bucks trading him unless he requests out. But with that being said, I do think that could hurt their leverage a little bit. I think where I sort of lean to like they're still going to get a kid's ransom is, hey, this guy's a top 3 player in the world, and there's going to be a lot of teams bidding for him. I consider it like a Hawks package because they have that Pelicans pick that's super valuable. But I heard Bill Simmons say that. I was like, that's a great one, Bill. That's all you. Let me try to come up with something else. But I feel like there's like Hawks, Raptors. I mean, maybe even like the Rockets could be in play. I feel like there's gonna be like we hurt the Knicks again. I think it's ridiculous. But I feel like there's going to be like the Warriors. There's going to be so many teams in play. I know we were talking before, maybe even the Blazers because they have some of their picks. I feel like that's going to help his value to the point where the Bucks get like a monster return like this. And then, like Bruce, as you mentioned, Dylan Harper, I kept going back and forth. Dylan Harper, Stephon Castle. I think Harper's the more valuable trade asset. I think the Spurs are going to hold on to him. I don't know. I could definitely see him going in the trade. It was like literally a flip of the coin between one of those two. I felt like just based off what I was seeing in terms of like other offers, I wanted to offer more picks. So I had more picks and then I just replaced Castle with Harper. But I feel like Castle's still an awesome asset for them to get. But yeah, I believe it's your turn, Bruce, with your third trade.
Yes, it is. And my third trade is going to be a wild one. It is disguised as similar to like Elie's, a DeMar DeRozan trade because he is featured in here, but it is not with DeMar DeRozan. It is in fact with Elie's main man, Michael Porter Jr. And I had this team linked to me right away. Now, some of the reactions, like you just mentioned, Eamon, talking about Giannis, may disrupt this, but if Giannis hasn't requested the trade, he wants to stay, and the Bucks are willing to do whatever to make Giannis stay. I have them trading for Michael Porter Jr. and bringing him in onto their team. They're ending up giving away Bobby Portis to the Nets alongside the 2030 first-round pick from Portland. And the Nets are going to get DeMar DeRozan because the Kings are going to get Kyle Kuzma. He's been linked to Sacramento multiple times for them. The Kings are a weird random front office who could make random decisions. And I know that DeRozan's contract's a little bit cheaper and they could get out of it a little bit easier. But I could see the Kings easily being like, if we could get Kuzma for DeRozan, we're easily going to do this. So overall, the Nets get Bobby Portis, DeMar DeRozan, and a first-round pick, the Portland pick from Milwaukee. The Bucks get Michael Porter Jr., and the Kings get Kyle Kuzma.
All right, I'm not gonna lie, that like took me a second to process it, but I do think that like makes sense for every team, especially like you said, if they're like trying to do whatever it takes to get Giannis to stay. I think that's like the type of move that they would make. And like value wise, it's very good. Porter would be an awesome fit for them. And I mean, I'd never totally thought about like the Nets being in play, but it makes sense because they can facilitate these salaries. It would probably make them a little bit worse. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. And then Kuzma to the Kings. Yeah, this is a really good one. Yeah, I like this one. I will say also, I was an idiot and I thought I was doing the DeRozan trade until we started this podcast, so I had to come up with another one on the fly real quick. And I didn't have a three-teamer, but I did have like something around Kuzma and DeRozan. And by the way, I meant to say this when I was talking about the Giannis shit. I know you're listening, Finn Keel. Let us know what you think about these like Bucks trades, whether it's this one from Bruce or the Giannis one that I came up with. I'd love to get your perspective as a Bucks fan. But yeah, Elie, what are your thoughts on this trade?
I actually do like this a lot from Milwaukee, only if Giannis stays. If Giannis doesn't stay, this trade, I mean, this doesn't obviously do anything for them. And I guess maybe if you trade Giannis, you can get somebody else who kind of fits alongside Michael Porter Jr., but I don't care who it is. That's a huge downgrade. We're building around Michael Porter Jr. instead of Giannis. No disrespect to Michael Porter Jr., that's my guy. I could definitely see every single team doing this. Sacramento is kind of the one that I mean, I think the problem with the Kings is that nothing they have done and nothing they can do is going to make sense because they're not really competing, but they're also not really building towards the future. And I don't think Kyle Kuzma changes that one way or the other. But I mean, in theory, they might see some appeal in kind of giving Kyle Kuzma that big opportunity, kind of like what he had in Washington for a couple of years. But I think Milwaukee probably walks away happy with this, all things considered. And even if it's not so much the trade package itself, to know that this could keep Giannis in Milwaukee, I think that alone makes this trade a win for them. But even if we're going based off the trade details itself, I think Milwaukee still comes away as the winner of this one.
Yeah, it's mainly just to try to keep Giannis happy and make sure that they have some sort of like offense generating from the wing because that's been one of their main discrepancies this season. They've had their young guards being able to do stuff, but their wing room has been terrible. So adding Michael Porter Jr. hopefully could kind of strengthen that a little bit and give them a little bit of a push to try to make Giannis happy. And then the Nets kind of just have the fun of DeMar DeRozan's contract over there as well.
Yeah, no, definitely, dude. I love that for Milwaukee. Honestly, I always thought like Pistons maybe for MPJ or like, but Milwaukee's awesome. Yeah, that's a great shout. Elie, who you got for your third trade?
I got one of the big hitters, I guess. I got I don't even know what I just got Ja Morant. I was trying to think of a joke in there. I couldn't do it. I got Ja Morant.
Big shooters?
I thought I'm like I feel like that might be too much for me to joke about. I don't know, but yeah, I got Ja Morant. Um, there are actually a lot of teams that I could see taking on Ja Morant. I feel like we're kind of at a point where people are forgetting just how good he at least can be. I don't know if he really is right now, but we all know how good he can be, how dynamic and everything like that. And so I've seen this team linked to him a ton over the past few years. I'm a little bit skeptical of it even still, but I do feel like it could make sense. The money could work. I got Ja Morant going to Miami. I got Ja Morant and Contavious Caldwell Pope going to Miami for Tyler Hero and Andrew Wiggins. Ja Morant, I think, in theory, is the best player in this trade. Tyler Hero has obviously been fantastic the last couple of seasons, and now that it's kind of not his team because it's I feel like it's still Bam Adebayo's team, but as kind of that go-to scorer on that team, he's blossomed. I just feel like the one thing they're really lacking is a true reliable point guard, and obviously Ja Morant brings that. Contavious Caldwell Pope brings that 3-and-D skill set that I think would obviously benefit Miami. They're in, I think, as we're recording this, they're the number 3 seed in the East, I believe. So they're ready to compete. I do think this would move the needle in their favor. And then from Memphis's perspective, Tyler Hero, like I was just talking about, is a great scorer. Andrew Wiggins is another guy who can really compete on both sides of the ball. And I actually like his specific fit in Memphis a lot, just because of kind of that I wouldn't call it pesky defense, but just his just he can bring his athleticism and use it to his advantage on both sides of the ball, and that's something that really works out in Memphis. The reason I'm a little bit skeptical about Ja Morant to Miami is because he doesn't space the floor. He's not a good shooter. He can knock him down, but like you wouldn't look at him as a 3-point shooter. And I feel like if you trade Tyler Hero in this deal, you lose a big part of that, and that's kind of the whole system Eric Spoelstra has in place for this year. But again, I think Ja Morant's probably the best player in this trade, and if you're trying to compete for a title, I think this might be worth doing.
Yeah, I think if there's any team that can kind of bring out the best in some of the players, it is Miami. We've seen that in the past. Like this trade for the Miami Heat, adding Ja Morant, like you mentioned, the best player, pairing him alongside Bam Adebayo. And they've also had some great wing success as well from guys like Hami Hawkes, who's been in the race, and guys like Nikola Jovic. So not necessarily, I think, needing Andrew Wiggins as much as a key for this Heat team. I do think him adding to that Grizzlies squad is going to be bringing out better in him, and I do think Tyler Hero would look a lot better alongside a guy in Jaren Jackson Jr. allowing to be that, and they have the guards in the guards that they signed in. They have obviously Scottie Pippen, but they also got Ty Jerome, so once he's fully back, they kind of have that guard room set up, so they don't really need a Ja Morant. So I do like this trade. The only thing that I don't necessarily think might hold it up is just once again the Heat trading Tyler Hero. I think he's just, like you mentioned, too vital for their system and their success right now, to where maybe they don't want to move off of him with them being a top 3 team. But if I were the Heat and I was presented this offer, I would accept this offer.
Yeah, no, this is definitely a really interesting one. I mean, we've talked about the troubled point guards, I guess you can call them, the Jaws, the LaMelo, and then Trae. I feel like if I'm any of those guys like representation, I'm pushing for a Heat trade. And I feel like I know a lot of people joke about it. Heat culture is a real thing. And I feel like Heat culture could really, really help John Morant. So I definitely like really like it from that standpoint. And like you said, Elie, like they do lack that like true point guard. I think if you're the Grizzlies, also if you get this offer, because I don't think Jaw's like trade value is super high, Zach Kleiman, you accept that immediately, 100%. I think, yeah, I mean, with the Heat, it's like, would they be willing to give up Tyler Hero? And, like, how much do they believe in Ja is, like, the question. But I could definitely see them considering something like this, especially because, I mean, it ultimately does raise your upside. You've looked better than a lot of people have expected, but I feel like this is a trade that, like, truly raises your upside and gives you, like, a real chance if you can rehabilitate Ja. I think, yeah, it could really work out. And, I mean, we've seen the Heat get the most out of guys routinely. I do think it would be funny to see Ja back in the system that he hates. But I mean, I think it works. I like the system. It's clearly working for the Heat. I just think that's like an interesting little side note. But yeah, no, I like this one a lot for sure. All right, I mean, I think we've talked about the other two. Point guards, I think it's time to talk some LaMelo Ball. Another weird one, weird player for me. Tough tough to figure out a team for him. I'm going to be honest. But I think I found one that kind of makes sense for both sides. I got him going to Toronto. And I got Toronto trading Emmanuel Quickly, Jacoby Walter, Jonathan Mogbo, and 2 first-round picks. Sort of similar to like the Davis trade. One of those picks is like simply because that Quickly contract isn't great, and then the other, like, you gotta get a pick back at least, like for LaMelo, who's been the face of this Hornets franchise. Even if you don't think his trade value is that high, I think they get a first-round pick back, right? And then Quickly, solid point guard, and then two like intriguing young players who haven't totally been able to find their footing in Toronto. I think just a change of scenery could help them a bit in that regard. So yeah, what do you guys think of this trade, and how do you see sort of LaMelo playing out in Toronto? I feel like for me, sort of similar to the Heat with Ja, it's just like a move. They've been exceeding their ceiling or their expectations this season, but this is a move to like increase their ceiling and be like a real threat in the East.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I feel like the one major complaint with Toronto has been that offensive production and where they can kind of find it from this guard room. And I feel like LaMelo would clearly rise that. Obviously, you mentioned the Quickly contract being one of the like weirder ones in the NBA because he hasn't really performed up to those expectations. So obviously trying to get a first from that would be solid. You mentioned Walter and Mogbo. Walter's kind of been in that wing room, kind of competing with guys like Ochai Agbaji and stuff like that. So I feel like freeing him up that opportunity, especially to give Agbaji some more minutes, I feel like they've kind of been competing. So one of those guys kind of needs to go for the Raptors to kind of get that full strength. So getting that younger piece, putting him alongside, Khan and Brandon Miller to kind of reinvent this youth movement, I think would be nice for Charlotte. If I'm Charlotte, I feel like the LaMelo Miles Bridges time has kind of passed, specifically with the rise of Khan and kind of investing in him. So if I'm them, I'm trying to take any offer. And if the Raptors are going to be desperate, which we've seen with other numerous stars, not even with Kawhi Leonard, but even this past offseason, them being interested in Kevin Durant, and in past offseasons being in Giannis Antetokounmpo. If I'm the Hornets, a small market team, and another one is trying to take that leap, I'm definitely doing this package. I like it for both teams.
I think I like it more for Toronto, and the idea, kind of like what you guys were mentioning, it does raise their ceiling a lot. And this is a Toronto team that, again, in a wide open Eastern Conference, I think really can kind of establish themselves as a contender. And adding a guy like LaMelo, I think, would raise their ceiling, and it would obviously give them another ball handler, another guy that can just kind of shoot lights out and just make plays, and just, like I said, really raise their ceiling. So I think this is a good trade for Toronto. They're a team that looks like they're actually trying to be something this year, and pairing him alongside Scotty Barnes is very intriguing. I'm not gonna lie. So I think this is a good deal for Toronto.
All right, word. Yeah, I'm glad that kind of made sense for both sides, I guess. But yeah, who you got as your fourth trade, Bruce?
All right, so this one is the fourth one, and then surprisingly, we keep going like Elie does his, double trade, then I do my double trade. You had the Hornets. Now I got a trade involving the Hornets, and this is going to involve Zion Williamson, and we're going to be sending him to Charlotte. And from the reports, obviously Zion non-guaranteed contract can kind of be waived at any point. It seems like there's relatively no value for Zion really around the league. So I adjusted my trade. I originally had Miles Bridges and T-John Saloon because he hadn't been playing that great for the Charlotte Hornets. Maybe the Pelicans would want to take some investment, but I feel like that might be just a little too much. So I adjusted my trade. I had Miles Bridges and Josh Green. You could do either Josh Green or Grant Williams. Williams coming off that 20 ACL, I feel like doesn't have as much value. So I went with Josh Green here. But basically for the Pelicans, it's getting off the $40 million in Zion Williamson. Obviously, they could just, waive him in general, but they take on Miles Bridges, who could be a productive piece in their front court, playing alongside either Yves Missy or Derek Queen. And Josh Green, if he is healthy, could be, a solid wing defender. And for the Hornets, if they even wanted to, they could make this trade, ultimately waive Zion, and then sign him to a cheaper deal, which then could give them even more flexibility in this process as well. I think it's a little bit more favored to the Hornets, but what's your guys' kind of thoughts on that? Also, Zion going back to Charlotte would be absolutely great because he played at Duke. He's from South Carolina. He's basically home. I think it's the best spot for Zion.
Yeah, I mean, he seems like a guy who would appreciate like some home cooked meals. So definitely. Yeah, I mean, this is a tough one because like, yeah, like at this point, this is like probably his value, but damn, it sucks for the Pelicans. Like, if you're the Hornets, I'd buy low on Zion. I mean, why not? What do you have to lose? Miles Bridges shouldn't even be in the NBA. Get rid of him. I mean, he's a good player, but like other reasons. So yeah, I mean, if you're giving up like Miles Bridges and Josh Green to buy low on Zion, the upside's certainly there. Why not? It would be fun. Maybe they keep LaMelo, maybe they don't. It's always been like one of my favorite landing spots for him. Especially because of that North Carolina connection, like you said. So yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, this is probably like his value. He's a really tough guy to find trades for, but like I said, it sucks that his value is this low and he hasn't been able to stay on the court. It's just brutal for the Pelicans, honestly.
I agree. I feel like this is just at the very least a trade that I wouldn't call it low risk, but I think the risk is worth taking for something like this because we all know how good Zion is in theory and when he's healthy and when he steps out onto the court. I mean, when he's healthy, he is as advertised. Like he is this elite prospect that everybody was calling him in 2019 the next big thing. Like when he's healthy and he's on the court, he pretty much is that guy. He's just never really on the court. I feel like for a Hornets team that is looking to finally make its way up the ladder, I mean, I feel like this is a trade worth making for them. It's another one that would raise their ceiling and maybe give them some more talent, I guess, just to work with and maybe become playoff contenders sooner rather than later.
Yeah, oh for sure. I think that's a very interesting one. Yeah, interested to see what happens with Zion. He's dealing with another injury, which is just unfortunate all around. But yeah, could definitely see him getting moved at the deadline, and unfortunately, it's probably not going to be for anything special. But yeah, who's your fourth trade, Ely?
So I didn't realize that I did this twice. I have another John Morant trade, but again, this isn't necessarily a John Morant trade. See, this one, because I did, so today's Thursday. I did my first three trades on Tuesday, and then I came back to this one yesterday, and I didn't even realize that I like did a second John Morant trade. And what's even funnier is once again, this is John Morant and Contavious Caldwell Pope. Um, this one, I'm gonna be honest, is the one that I felt the least confident in. I feel like this one's kind of out there, and I'm gonna have to do some explaining. I know it, but it's John Morant and Contavious Caldwell Pope going to Washington for Chris Middleton, CJ McCollum, and Trae Johnson. I feel like from Memphis's perspective, again, if they're going to have to trade John Morant, they might as well get some people who can help them contend right now because they do look like they're ready to be serious contenders this season. They have been for a while. A lot of it's kind of dependent on Ja. Chris Middleton, CJ McCollum are guys that can come in right now and help them contribute. They are one of the worst 3-point shooting teams in the league. So adding both of these guys should help. And if you're going to trade John Morant, getting a guy back like Trae Johnson, I think is kind of a no-brainer. And then from Washington's perspective, you get John Morant, who, I mean, at this point, probably doesn't have a lot of leverage, doesn't have very high trade value. It's definitely worth, I think, taking that risk. And they also need potentially their point guard of the future too, at least one that they know they can trust and pair next to Alex Sarr and guys like that. And then Contavious Caldwell Pope, he goes back to Washington. He did play for Washington before, right?
Yeah, yeah, he did. Because
He
then,
did, right?
yeah, yeah,
I'm like, yeah, okay, yeah. So he goes back to Washington. There's, I guess, some familiarity there, but he was another one that was kind of just thrown in there to make the trade work. This was one that I kind of feel like is a win-lose for both teams, but I also feel like maybe most trades are like that. So this one was definitely out there. I'll be the first one to say that was out there, but I'm just kind of curious to know what you guys think of it.
I like I like the John Morant with the Alex Sarr pairing because I feel like with John Morant you can maybe not that it's a one-on-one comparison, but maybe you can get that kind of like John Wall energy that you had from back in the day out of John Morant and kind of have that with that point guard running with a guy like Alex Sarr. I do think they still have some other tradable contracts like a Corey Kispert, some of these other wings that they could also move off of to get into that younger movement. And for the Grizzlies, I could see them doing this too because they're going to completely bottom out and be bad and just go towards the bottom and kind of just reconstruct this thing. Taking on these expiring contracts does make sense. Maybe they can make a trade for Jaren Jackson with him being trade eligible. Some other teams can get involved. The one thing that I think just has the sticking point is just Trae Johnson. I don't know if the Wizards are willing to give up on him as much. So that's where I feel like the Grizzlies would take this more. It's a little bit more in favor for them. But that's kind of where I stand. I think Trae Johnson still has that upside potential for the Wizards that they still want to see, even though it's still been his rookie year.
yeah, for sure. I mean, this is a super interesting one. I haven't thought about Washington a ton as like a landing spot for any of these guys, but like you said, I mean, they really do need that like point guard of the future. Bub Carrington has looked really rough in his second year. So yeah, I mean, I think it does kind of make sense. I like the idea for the Grizzlies of getting two expiring contracts and opening up a ton of cap space. I think that's like one of the best parts of this trade for them. For the Wizards, it's just ultimately something I would have to pass on with the Trae Johnson of it all. I mean, Trae is just, he has so much upside. He hasn't looked amazing as a rookie, I would say, but he has so much upside, and I just have a hard time giving up on a guy like that, especially like at this stage of their rebuild. I think there's like a way to like make this work. Maybe it's like I mean, contractually, I'm just like spitballing here, but like some combination of like Bub Carrington, Cam Whitmore, AJ Johnson, Bilal. I would trade Bilal, Koulibaly before any of those guys maybe. But like I feel like Koulibaly could be like he hasn't been having the best season, but he could be like that like Trae Johnson centerpiece almost because he is still young. So getting some young talent out of it is my point without trading Trae, and I could be sort of on board of it with this trade for Washington, even though I feel like they kind of just want to tank. I don't know how much Ja moves the needle at this point, but it is very interesting, and yeah, I do love the idea of like Star and Ja playing next to each other. I think that's super intriguing. I don't, Trey Johnson, I'm so high on him. I think I had him as a top five prospect. I'd have a really, really tough time giving up on. All right. Now we gotta get into my Kins trades, which I hate. So yeah, I mean, maybe you guys like them a little more than I do, but like genuinely, like when I'm gonna read these off, I kind of hate it for both teams, but these guys are really hard to find landing spots for. I mean, yeah. So yeah, let's start off with Sabonis. Um, got Sabonis and Devin Carter going to Memphis in exchange for KCP, Santi Aldama, Gigi Jackson, Jock Landale, and two first round picks. I think there have to be some sort of like protections attached to these picks. Or you could just do the magic picks that they got from the Bane trade, which probably aren't going to be that valuable. I was thinking maybe Sabonis for Ja, but I didn't want to do that because we had other Ja trades and stuff. Grizzlies have always been the team that I can like talk myself into with Sabonis, which I can't say for a lot of teams. Lakers kind of makes sense. They need some financial flexibility because they got to resign Austin Reeves. So that from that standpoint, it doesn't really make sense. Raptors was another team I kicked around, but yeah, really hard, and I just kept going back to the Grizzlies. I love the idea of him next to Triple J, and I feel like also like Zach Edey, that's like a three-headed monster in the front court. I don't think it's the worst problem in the world to have. Like, how do you split minutes between those guys? We know that Tomas Isolo loves to sort of split minutes and give guys a little bit lesser minutes and stuff like that. So from that, it kind of makes sense. And I like that. My favorite part is just JJJ and Sabonis, I think, really complement each other nicely. And this could make them a little bit more competitive. They've shown some signs of life recently, which is encouraging. So yeah, that's the idea for the Grizzlies. And the idea for the Kings is like, you kind of got to trade Sabonis at this point and take what you can get. And I just have no idea what his value is. It could be more. Maybe there's like some sort of trade with like a LaMelo or Ja, but if there's not like that like swapping a problems trade, which I think is like kind of likely, I feel like it would look something like this.
Yeah, I would agree. I feel like it's more likely to be kind of like that swap kind of with the guards too, just because the value is kind of nowhere, like no one knows what the value of these players are because they're not on winning successful teams and we haven't seen them on those in a little while. So it's a little bit difficult to kind of gauge that. I do like this trade though for the Grizzlies. I don't think there's much of an issue with having Zach Edey, JJJ, and Sabonis, specifically with, this team's had so many wings and so many guards. They can find their ways to have so many bigs in these rotations and work. And like you mentioned with Sabonis, he needs that kind of defensive big. And I feel like JJJ complements that absolutely perfectly, specifically well with Zach Edey. They also get Devin Carter as well, who I know as we talked about the Kings, they just don't play. They similar to Keon Ellis, he just doesn't get any playing time for no reason. And he's a former lottery pick. Got to give him that opportunity. And with the Grizzlies being able to mold these second round picks and some of these younger talents with their great development, I feel like that's kind of one of the better spots for a guy who has been kind of neglected in those areas. So I would like that trade for them. And then for the Kings, like you mentioned, they just have to kind of get off Sabonis. So taking any value that you kind of get is there. I think maybe some other teams might have some better offers, but if you're the Kings and you feel like the two first round picks and GG Jackson and all these other young assets, KCP can be available. I mean, I could see it going too. I mean, the Kings just aren't a smart front office, so it wouldn't shock me if the Kings were to accept anything at this rate.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think this favors Memphis. Obviously, it helps move the needle more in their direction, which I feel like I've said a lot, by the way. Moves the needle in their direction. I feel like it's like the 10th time I've said that. But it does move it, I think, in the right direction for them. I think obviously Sabonis is, despite his flaws and despite his contract situation and everything going on, I mean, he is technically or was an MVP candidate the last like 3 years. He finished top 10 in the voting, I think, all 3 years or 2 years or something like that. I mean, he obviously can play. He's a fantastic offensive player, a fantastic rebounder. And I think next to a guy like Jaren Jackson Jr., I think that would be a really interesting fit and a really appealing fit. So I feel like this is pretty obviously in Memphis's favor. But going back to it, I mean, the Kings probably just don't have a lot of leverage at this point. Everybody knows they're trying to make trades. Everybody knows how bad their situation is. They're not competing. They're kind of like I was saying earlier. They're not competing, but they're also not really in a position to have a lot to look forward to in the future outside of guys like Keegan Murray. But I think this is a trade that I guess all things considered, they can't really be mad about just knowing their situation. But I definitely think this is better for the Grizzlies.
I mean, it's a really tough exercise to come up with a Sabonis landing spot. And yeah, I mean, who knows? Maybe he has more value than I'm anticipating. I just think it's going to be tricky. But yeah, I mean, I'm never not going to be intrigued by this Sabonis Grizzlies idea. I feel like I brought it up on like the last 3 podcasts. It's so interesting to me. I kind of hope we get to see it in one way or another. But yeah, um, Bruce, who did you have as your fifth and final trade guy?
Alrighty, so this one is my biggest trade. I saved it for last, and there's a lot of moving pieces in this trade. So let me know
Might
if you
have to
guys
write something
do
down.
get confused here. But well, I'll try to make it easier than I did last time. So this trade is involving the drama queen of the offseason, Mr. RFA himself, Jonathan Kuminga, the man who took the free agency for what, 2 months at ransom because nothing else was going on and we just had to wait for him. But he's eventually going to get moved because even after that one game with the Warriors, it's clear he's not fitting in. And I've seen this kind of mocked around a little bit, so I made a little bit of adjustments, but he's going to be going to the Pelicans. Him, Moses Moody, and a Warriors pick in 2028. Those three things are going to be going to the Pelicans. Pelicans are taking a flyer on Kuminga. They want to be bad. They can invest in him. They're getting a nice young player in Moses Moody to play some defense as well, and they get a first-round pick. The Warriors, in return, are going to be getting Trey Murphy from the Pelicans, going to be a nice addition, someone that they've had coveted in the past, but someone that could be a viable trade asset and someone I think could really rise on another team, specifically the Golden State Warriors, with their great three-point shooting volume and his. They're also going to get Jose Alvarado to kind of replace some of that scrappy defensiveness at that guard position that they're going to lose for Moses Moody. And I think Alvarado is kind of one of those like finishing, touching pieces that you really add on a trade. And then they're also going to get Haywood Highsmith from the Brooklyn Nets. They're going to be the third team involved in this deal. Just some added wing depth and size for their wing rotation, replacing Jonathan Kuminga to kind of fit in with Jimmy Butler. And then the Nets are going to get a little bit of a bigger package. They're going to get Buddy Hield and Trace Jackson Davis from the Warriors. Obviously, being hard capped, they have to move some more money out, so they get those two players. But they're also going to get Jordan Hawkins from the New Orleans Pelicans, a young, intriguing player that was a former lottery pick out of UConn. Hasn't really lived up to the standards over there in New Orleans, been hindered by, Herb Jones, Trey Murphy, even Jeremiah Fears and Derek Queen this year. So I think a new landing spot for him would be nice. They're also going to get a first-round pick from the Golden State Warriors as well for taking on that Buddy Hield contract, and then 2 seconds from a Golden State, a Toronto second, and an Orlando second. I felt like this kind of trade worked for all teams. Maybe the Nets are a little stingy in this because they want to be bad too. Maybe don't want to give the Pelicans both young assets from the Warriors to make some things. But if the Nets want to be bad, taking a flyer on Trace Jackson Davis, who hasn't really been in this Warrior system, a flyer on Jordan Hawkins, and taking the Buddy Hield contract, getting 2 seconds and a first for giving up Haywood Highsmith is a robbery for me. And then the Warriors get better adding Haywood Highsmith, Trey Murphy, and Jose Alvarado, while the Pelicans get Jonathan Kuminga, Moses Moody, and a first.
Yeah, wow. It's complicated, but I like this one. Wow. Yeah. I mean, I feel like Trey's a guy that's always kind of been linked to the Warriors. It's like, dude, like I don't know if it makes sense. Like he looked so good last year. Not to say that he hasn't looked good this year, but I feel like he's looked just a little bit worse to where it makes it realistic that he gets moved despite the Pelicans' horrible pick situation. And I think this is a nice return for him. I still kind of am intrigued by Kuminga. Who knows what his real role is? I feel like I've seen some nice moments from him though. Moses Moody's a guy that I always think is kind of being held back, and then you get that pick in 2028, which who knows how good the Warriors are going to be. I think that makes sense. Trey Murphy, awesome fit in the Warriors system. I love that idea. Yeah, so you're getting rid of Kuminga, and you're solving another problem because you get a little bit more scoring next to Curry. Yeah, no, I really like that. And then for the Hawks, or not the Nets. Giving up Hayward Highsmith and getting some like real value in return kind of makes it a no brainer. So yeah, I mean, I like this one. Yeah, I don't. I mean, I don't really know who would say no. If I guess maybe the Pelicans if they like really covet Trey Murphy, but I don't feel like this is a bad return for him at all.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I mean, I'm a lot higher on Trey Murphy than I think, or I think I have higher expectations for Trey Murphy than kind of what he's been doing this year. But I think we know how good he could play. For some reason, he always turns it up against the Celtics specifically. I think it was last year he had, I don't even remember how many points. He had like a career high against us or something like that. It was something insane. But I'm a big Trey Murphy fan. I like the idea of him in Golden State. I hate to say it again, but it does move the needle again in the right direction for them. I just think the Warriors are in such a weird spot right now where like they're good enough to maybe compete for a title, but they're just not doing it. Obviously, Steph has missed some time, and they just have a lot of problems that they need to figure out. I feel like this is a good trade for them. Everybody knows Kuminga's probably going to be gone soon anyway, so might as well get something good in return for him and obviously some other pieces. And I think Trey Murphy is that guy that can really help them take it up to that next level.
I'd also agree with you, Eamon, that I think Moses Moody has been hindered by that Warriors team, so getting him to a new kind of system would bring that kind of better outside of him from the former lottery pick. And I just think that it's time for the Warriors. Like they have all these picks, they have all these young talents. They try to do what the Spurs did, kind of have that young team with while the championship team was kind of there and just didn't really work. I just feel like for Curry's career, for Butler's career, for Draymond's career, you kind of just have to kind of go all in to make this move. And Trey Murphy is a win now move, but he's also still kind of young too and can still be a nice little asset for their future. And then I think the defensive upgrades with Alvarado and Highsmith just give them a little bit of a notch as well. So I'm glad that you guys really like this trade and the Michael Porter Jr. trade because they both took me like 40 minutes to actually get them completed. So I'm glad that my hard work was willfully taken back as well.
Yeah, man, hard work pays off. I mean, I was trying to do some 3-team deals. Like, I'm gonna do these 2-team deals. Hopefully, it makes sense. But who knows? You've been killing it though. Elie, what's your last trade?
So my last trade, there's almost a part of me that wishes I didn't end it on this because it's kind of a disappointment considering all the other ones we talked about. It's just a trade between the Pacers and the Clippers. The Pacers get Ivica Zubac from Los Angeles in return for Jarris Walker and Benedict Mathurin. This is actually a trade that we all kind of talked about before. Who knows what's going on with the Clippers, if they're going to be making some trades at the deadline, try to get some future assets, try to get some picks in return. If they're just going to give up on the season, we don't know yet. But one of the main, or probably their biggest trade candidate realistically is Zubac, unless they're going to trade Harden, which I don't really see happening. And I mean, rightfully so. He's been great for them ever since they got him a few years ago. He can rebound like crazy. He provides a lot of value on both sides of the ball. Obviously, he isn't a stretch big or anything like that, but he is still a force in the paint. He can help with the scoring. He can help set screens. He can help with a little bit of everything. And the Pacers obviously need a center. Miles Turner left in free agency. And even though things are looking up for them, their center by committee is still kind of leaving a lot to be desired. They already cut James Wiseman. Tony Bradley's basically a non-factor on that team. I like Isaiah Jackson, but he's kind of further proving that he's just a backup at best. And Jay Huff, I mean, I don't know how much of Jay Huff you guys have been watching or how much you've been following, but he's looking pretty good. He actually currently leads the league in blocks per game. And if I mean, obviously a lot of it has to do with Wemby being out for a good amount of time, but he's been improving. They actually just inserted him into the starting lineup like a week ago or so, and he's been killing it ever since. but I don't think Jay Huff is a starting caliber center on a championship team. Maybe he is, and that's where Zubac comes in. And then Mathurin is a restricted free agent next year. Jarris Walker's a guy who's just kind of looked like a massive disappointment. You got to give something to get something. I think the Clippers, in theory, would be happy with both of those guys. Of changes their long term outlook a little bit, and it does give them an opportunity to retool at least around Mathurin. Maybe Walker, maybe they get some of his value back. In my opinion, I don't know if this trade is worth doing for either team. I feel like from the Clippers' perspective, I just feel like you can get something. I wouldn't say more valuable than Mathurin or Walker, because I do think that's a solid package for a guy like him. He's a guy who could help. Zubac is a guy that can help any team in the league contending or on the fringe, and I just feel like because of that, it makes sense for them to really be smarter, I guess, about the package they're getting in return. And then from Indy's perspective, he's an upgrade at center. I just don't know if he's a big enough upgrade to risk trading Mathurin, who I've been a huge fan of for a long time and I think should be with the team forever, and Jarris Walker, who I haven't really given up on yet.
Yeah, me personally, I've always thought of the Clippers being a Mathurin team interested, just because with their deteriorating roster, I even was looking back at it last year because I thought this Clippers team that we saw this year would be the team that we saw last year. So I kind of figured we would kind of see this kind of falling apart. And they were always a team that I kind of kept my eyes on for him, just because I thought like it would kind of work to kind of reset their team into that younger direction. But with them, not really having a lot of not a lot of picks, and they're going to have that cap flexibility. I don't necessarily know if this is the move that they go and do. Like, I don't necessarily know if Zubac is someone they're going to 100% trade. I think this benefits the Pacers a little bit more, though, just because if you add Zubac, even with their standings now, I don't think that the Pacers are going to crawl into the play-in or crawl into the playoffs by anything by that matters. So still having a lottery pick with Zubac and moving off of that Mathurin salary to use for a rookie that they will be drafted in the lottery because they traded for their pick back could be a little bit easier for, their lighter tax bill and how they like to run their team to make it a little bit easier. But I do think that if you're the Pacers, giving up on Mathurin and Jarris Walker in a retool season might not be the smartest situation. Keeping Mathurin and extending him to maybe like a cheaper discounted extension, maybe not to his full potential, could still give you that benefit of having him with that. So I don't know. It's a hard one for me. I think that the Pacers benefit a little bit more because they get Zubac, but I still am high on Bennett Mathurin and Jarris Walker. I just think that it would look better for the Pacers' outlook than it would for the Clippers, but I still think it's a good deal regardless.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think this is kind of a win-win. For the Pacers, you absolutely, I think, have to upgrade your center room at some point. I feel like you have a lot of nice potential rotational centers when the team's fully healthy. I just don't think you have that like starting center yet. And I think Zubac would be that, and I think he's a perfect fit in the system. So I really like it from that standpoint. And then, I mean, in terms of like the Ben Mathurin piece of this, I am high on him. I think he has a lot of upside. He was a really important piece for the team last year. At the same time, he's a restricted free agent this summer, so I just don't know what his future is. I don't know how much the Pacers are willing to pay to keep him. And if they're not willing to pay top dollar, I mean, why not sort of move him to acquire a center? I feel like that's their clearest path to getting a center. So I like it from that standpoint. Walker, I can't fully give up on him yet, but he hasn't shown much signs that he has like a lot of promise or is the lottery pick that they hoped for him to be. So I sort of get like, yeah, punt on him, and then you get a really impactful center to fill that void. So I do like it from that standpoint a lot. And then the Clippers, it's like, hey man, can you get some young talent? I mean, that would be nice. And I don't think you want to like fully bottom out because you don't own your pick this year. So you get some young talent, but you're still able to compete, and you have that like secondary shot creator in the games which it's a lot of games where Kawhi doesn't play in, or even when Kawhi is playing, you have that like nice third option. Because this offense, especially when Kawhi's not playing, is really bad because it's so hard and dependent. So yeah, I do like that for both sides. I think that's a win-win to me. Here's one trade that I can't say like for both sides, but it's the best I could come up with, especially on the fly. Like I mentioned earlier, I was an idiot. I thought I was doing DeRozan. I was doing LaVine. So for Zach LaVine, we're gonna go back to our good friends in New Orleans. And I have them giving up Herb Jones and Jordan Poole, as well as guess what, guys? Joe Dumars. This might be breaking news. Protected first round pick. You can do that, right? Great. You can. So yeah, Herb Jones, Jordan Poole, protected first round pick for LaVine. Logic for the Pelicans is LaVine, I think he's a lot better than Jordan Poole. Herb Jones, super, super impactful role player. Hasn't been like awesome to the point where I think you can't trade him this season. And he does move the needle a little bit to the point where I don't think this is going to be like the worst team in the West anymore. And when you don't have your pick, I think that's really beneficial. I would love to see LaVine in a winning situation. It's just like I don't know how many winning teams are going to roll the dice on him. And then, yeah, for the Kins, you're probably not going to get that big of a return for him, given his enormous contract. So I don't hate the idea of, I mean, Jordan Poole, he just seems like the most obvious Sacramento Kin of all time. I don't really love him as a player, but I don't hate the idea of getting Jordan Poole as like a slightly worse version of Zach LaVine. And then Herb Jones, who's a nice role player. And hey, guess what? You get some sort of first round pick. So yeah, what do you guys think of this one?
I mean, the Kings get younger, so I mean, I think it's a win for them. I think that's definitely a benefit. You get Herb Jones, who I think could work alongside Keegan Murray very well, and has been. I know Nick Clifford has been solid as a rookie there, but they're very similar to the Suns last year, where they didn't have like a connective defensive wing, and that's what this team doesn't have and hasn't had for years. So I think Herb Jones being able to fill that role would be pretty solid. You add Jordan Poole, who was a questionable trade for Joe Dumars to make in the offseason, trading away an expiring contract for more years of Jordan Poole to try to accelerate this winning thing. I think he would be convinced that Zach LaVine, Derek Queen, and maybe Zion, if he's healthy and wants to play, could make a play-in spot or something like that. So for the Pelicans, I think it would definitely help them out, maybe not be the worst team in the NBA. And for LaVine, I mean, it's New Orleans, but what really can you do? You have no leverage. You went from Chicago to Sacramento to New Orleans. I feel like New Orleans might be even a little bit better than Sacramento. So if I'm the Kings and this is the deal that is presented with me, I'm 100% doing it because I just want to get off that Zach LaVine contract. I don't want to be attached to it. And once again, similar to the Kings, the Pelicans are a terrible front office. So let's get the two terrible front offices in the room. Let's make a trade and let's see how crazy they can decide to blow up their teams. I'm all for it.
Whoops. I feel like that would be a lot of fun. I would love to listen in on that phone call or the meeting or whatever it is. That'd be really entertaining. I feel like this is, I wouldn't say easily, but I feel like this is definitely a win for the Kings more than it's a win for the Pelicans. I feel like, I mean, Herb Jones is incredible. And I feel like in theory, I mean, he would fit in anywhere, but on a Kings team where they don't really have a lot of direction and they at least would have the opportunity to kind of give him maybe an even bigger role than he already has in New Orleans, I think that would be incredible. And Jordan Poole is a guy that can play. I mean, we don't know how much he can contribute on a team like Sacramento, but we know he can play. We know he can shoot and he can do all these little things too. And he's also still pretty young. So there's some upside there in theory. I feel like I kind of struggle a little bit to see exactly why New Orleans does this trade. I don't know if it's a matter of, like, I don't know if it's the idea that Zion is eventually going to be healthy again and the two of them together can kind of be like a playoff duo, or if it's just as simple as they don't want to finish as one of the worst teams in the league because they don't have their pick. I think there are reasons to do this trade, but I feel like in my opinion, this is definitely more of a win for Sacramento than it is for New Orleans.
Yeah. No, that's definitely valid. I think my sort of logic was, hey, let me find like a trade that wouldn't be an absolutely horrible return for the Kins and a team that's like kind of desperate enough to take on LaVine. But yeah, I mean, I think I said it before. I don't really love this trade. I don't really love either of the Kins trades I came up with, but I think that wraps up this segment. We had 15 absolutely crazy blockbuster trades, maybe some a little bit more minor, but like 15 guys that very well could be on the move. This trade deadline season, quickly, I want to say I've heard Harden thrown around a lot. I just don't think the Clippers would trade him given that they don't have their first round pick. Maybe I'm wrong, but unless he requests a trade, which he could, he's Harden, and I don't see them trading him. So yeah, ton of fun. Put it on our GM caps. I think just briefly to wrap up the show though, if you're watching on any visual platform, you see the CP jersey behind me. You see Bruce wearing the CP jersey. We just have to give our thoughts quickly on this Chris Paul situation, which is just absolutely nuts. If you didn't see it, just in the wee hours of Wednesday morning, Wednesday night, whatever, they decided to waive Chris Paul, the best player in their franchise's history. And yeah, it sort of came out that he wasn't on good terms with the coaching staff and the organization. He was sort of
So I texted you both at 3 in the morning when it happened, and I knew neither of you would be awake, but I just happened to be awake that one night where my goat gets cut and waived by his franchise. It's absolutely disgraceful to do. Not only for the fact that the Clippers have a precedent with this, right? They have 0 retired numbers. We've talked about this before, but they did this to Blake Griffin. They brought him up to the rafters. They basically said, "You're going to be our franchise guy." And then they said, a month later, "You're going to Detroit and you're going to go have fun being the 8th seed in the playoffs. See you later." Then they do this with Chris Paul, which, once again, it's Chris Paul. I could see maybe if this was the Hornets or if it was the Wizards, where they're like, we don't know Chris Paul, right? He's trying to get these young guys to win. It's not really working. We can move off of him. But this is the Clippers, the franchise that he has basically birthed it and put it on the map. Basically, before Chris Paul, they were the Little Brothers of New York playing in Staples Center, having this. And then they have the Lob City time. Then they kind of work into the Kawhi time. But that's all based off of the success from Lob City and from those teams. The Blake Griffin, the CP, the DeAndre Jordan, the JJ Redick. The fact that you're going to dishonor someone like that, it doesn't shock me because it's the Clippers, but it's just absolutely disgusting. I know I said it to both of you, but if they weren't in LA, like if they weren't in a prime city, they would be viewed as a New Orleans or a Sacramento or a Utah. They would be at these bottom echelon tiers of teams saying they should be relocated to other franchises in other cities because of how they treat their superstars. It's sad to see in comparison, specifically when you have, the Golden State Warriors who had this little run where they built their dynasty, and you see how they treat their stars as a young small franchise. You would want to do that as the Clippers. So I just think it's absolutely ridiculous. The fact that Ty Lue couldn't have a conversation for weeks with his best player. I know Chris Paul wasn't playing good. I know he was brought on to be basically injury management assurance for the playoffs and stuff like that. But this is just not the way that you handle any type of organization handles with any player, regardless if it's Terrence Mann or Luka Garza. It's Chris Paul. I don't care if he's on a minimum contract. You don't handle it this way. It's just absolutely sickening to see. And for Chris Paul, especially on his retirement tour, his last year, it could be cut short. Obviously we're biased as CP fans, but I've even seen in the internet, just NBA fans in general, people that are, know CP acts like this and understand that this is the type of way that he is, and they're still frustrated. It's just not right for someone at his high magnitude. And it's happened in the past, kind of similarly with Carmelo kind of getting disrupted through his end of his career. But I don't know. It shouldn't be happening to the stars or past stars in the NBA, regardless of their age.
Yeah, I honestly, I feel like when it comes to everything that went down, I don't have really anything to add. I feel like Bruce very passionately touched upon everything. And yeah, it definitely took me by surprise. And based off what we know, we're not in these conversations, we're not in the locker rooms. Based off what we know, it definitely seems like an unfortunate break for Chris Paul. I'm going to talk more about the Chris Paul, like what this means for Chris Paul individually. I mean, this is just such a super unfortunate way to potentially go out. Like, we may have already seen him play his last game in the NBA. And I know a lot of the current generation doesn't really like Chris Paul, whether it be because of his rivalries with Steph Curry or whatever it might be, or his attitude, or the fact that he doesn't have a ring, or because that matters to a lot of people. Chris Paul is still one of the greatest point guards to ever play, potentially top 5 all time. I think pretty easily, like top 7 or 8. And we all know he went back to the Clippers to retire a Clipper. Like, we all know that's the real reason he did it. And he had a chance to potentially win a ring for the first time in his career. At least we all thought he was going to have that chance. And uh, I mean, it's not his fault that they were bad, obviously, and that they've been injured and everything like that. But he's not going to have that opportunity. He's not going to have that opportunity to win a ring potentially at all this season. He's not going to have an opportunity to do it with the Clippers, which is, I think, depending on who you ask, the franchise he's most known for. I mean, I personally still know him more as a Hornet, but I definitely don't think it's crazy to think Chris Paul and think of the Clippers at all. And yeah, he's arguably the greatest player they've ever had, at least the greatest player in, within the context of their franchise. And for him to just go out like that, potentially never play again, have a retirement tour essentially that lasted, 2 days? Like, it's a super unfortunate thing. I hope he does come back at some point and joins another team. I mean, the one team that I've seen kind of thrown out a little bit, or the two teams, I guess, are the Lakers. And I have seen some people mention the Timberwolves potentially. I think that could maybe be interesting. But yeah, it's just a super unfortunate break for a guy that's going to be in the Hall of Fame in a few years.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, this shit pisses me off. This is probably like the most mad I'm gonna get on a podcast, and I am biased because I'm a Chris Paul fan, my favorite player of all time. But this is pathetic, spineless shit from the Clippers, and frankly, it's nothing that shocks me, which is the sad part. This Clippers organization is horrible, in my opinion, one of the worst organizations in the NBA. I mean, you look at their history, and it's not like they've tried to make moves. I get they've tried to make big moves, but this is an organization that's built on a lack of accountability. And I think that's been their downfall of like this whole like Kawhi era. And Chris Paul, say what you will about him, he's a leader. He brings that accountability, and you get rid of him. Guess what, guys? When you're 6-15 or whatever the record is, you're gonna have to have some tough conversations. You're gonna have to be criticized. Fucking grow up and deal with it, man. It really pisses me off. The Tyronn Lue of this all really, really annoys me too, because there was a report, not only like they weren't on speaking terms, but Chris tried to meet with Lue, and he just refused to multiple times. And that's crazy to me. And when you look at Tyronn Lue, he's overall, I would say, a good coach. But the one thing that he's like constantly been criticized for is like he just gives his players too much free reign. He's not like that Ime Udoka like hard-nosed style of coach, and not every coach has to be that. But at some point, there has to be some leadership. There has to be some accountability. And I feel like that's really been lacking with him on this Clippers team this year. And Chris, he was trying to help solve those problems. I get it. He's not an elite player by any means at this stage of his career. He's like barely able to play real minutes. But he's one of the greatest players, not just point guards ever, one of the greatest players ever. And clearly like the best Clipper of all time to me. And it's insane. His jersey should absolutely be retired by the Clippers. It looked like we were trending in this direction. Their first retired jersey, like you said, of all time, despite this team having a 50-plus year history. And now I just don't know what that looks like. I think this could like potentially damage his relationship with the Clippers for as long as he's like an NBA figure. And that's just really, really unfortunate. And the other thing that really pisses me off is that they decided to extend Lawrence Frank today. After this whole thing happened, just about everyone criticized the Clippers. I didn't really see anybody defending them. And that's just not me being like this Chris Paul guy. I could not find a single person defending the Clippers. It was just one of the most insane things I've ever seen. Yeah, that's just no way to treat your franchise legend at the end of the day. And it's really disappointing how it ended up like this. And yeah, this was supposed to be the retirement tour. This was supposed to be a great moment for him. He had an awesome career, and they totally tarnished it. And yeah, it's just extremely disappointing. I could see him going to the Lakers because he does want to stay in LA, and because he has that relationship with LeBron and JJ Redick. So that's the one team I could see him kind of going to. But yeah, just disappointing stuff overall.
Yeah, and the main thing too is like, I know he was interested in the Suns and the Clippers. Those were kind of like his two teams in free agency. But the main reason he was interested in the Clippers was because he wanted to stay in LA, because he was like, I miss too much with my family, too much traveling. So that's the thing too. It's like, even if he gets waived, it's not like he's going to go sign to like a Detroit just to go win a championship. He doesn't want to do that. I think the only two teams he would realistically consider are the Lakers, just because they're in LA. And I think the only other team he would consider is OKC, for the two reasons that him and Shea have a great relationship. He was at the finals last year watching them, and he knows that they're 20-1, and they're going to listen to his leadership. Shea's not going to let CP walk around and not do it. They will listen to him. They will, and I feel like that's kind of like I feel like the Lakers would be cool just because it is LA, because it is LeBron. He'd have a chance to win. And like, because of the veto trade too, it'd be like, oh, he got to play for both LA teams and stuff like that. But like, I don't know. I feel like if anything were to be like the best for Chris Paul, OKC would be, because they would just let him be like basically a part-time coach. And the craziest thing too, not to go back on it, but like Udonis Haslem never got cut and he sat on the bench for 5 years and did nothing. Why is Chris Paul getting cut when we're told to be held about accountability? And you mentioned that, Eamon, like the accountability hold up. This Clippers team was built to be a playoff contender and is full of all veterans. It's James Harden, it's Kawhi Leonard. There's no young player that's being told to be held accountable and he's sitting in the corner scared because Chris Paul is yelling at him. These are all guys that are veterans that have played across the league that have either been number 1, number 2, number 3 options or on good playoff teams. They've all been held accountable in their past. So I understand why the raging from Chris Paul, who's the 13th man, is what's setting off the tones. It's really ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, just two more quick things. You brought up the Haslam point. I think that's a great comparison. I've never seen a player get cut for leadership. That's the craziest thing to me. And I mean, maybe he was just really out of pocket and we're underestimating that. But guys, this is the most disappointing team in the league. You need some accountability. And you look at Harden, you look at Kawhi, they're fantastic players. I'm not going to be a biased CP3 fan. I would say they're higher above him all time. And they're certainly better than him now. But one thing that neither of them has ever been in their career is a leader. And that's what the team lacked at the end of the day. And yeah, really disappointing. I hope they lose every game for the rest of the season.
Thing I was thinking about too, and like I don't know, maybe I'm like over sensationalizing it. Maybe I'm overthinking this part, but it's like I just think back, like Paul Pierce signed a 1-day contract to retire with us, and Kyle Lowry has already said at the very least he wants to sign a 1-day contract with Toronto, and Derrick Rose, I'm like 99% sure did that with Chicago. Chris Paul had a chance to play with that team that he wanted to retire with, and I mean technically he did, but it's just like it just kind of puts things into perspective. Like there are so many players out there who make it a point. Like I want to be a part of this team when I retire. Switching gears a little bit, we just saw Rob Gronkowski do it with the Patriots in the NFL. So many players really care about this stuff too, and it's obvious that Chris Paul was like that. So it's just kind of unfortunate. On top of that he had a chance to actually play for the team, and it just fell apart like this.
No, absolutely. I think that's a great point because, I mean, like we've seen so many guys across sports just sign that 1-day contract just because it means so much to them. And when you're a Clippers team, you have only been to the conference finals once. I mean, they didn't make the conference finals with CP, I get it, but like by all accounts, maybe you want to say the Kawhi time where, he had an aspiration scandal, fake trees, all that shit, and he sat out every other game. Maybe you want to say that's the brightest years of your franchise, but I think it's the Lob City era. And he wants to come back. He wants to relive it, and you can't even honor it. Yeah, I don't have anything more to say because I'm just gonna get more pissed off about it.
Maybe he goes back to New Orleans. He gets to reunite with the Pelicans and with DeAndre Jordan. I think that would be fun. Goes back to New
Completely
Orleans.
forgot DJ was over there.
Yeah.
He got signed late in the season. That would be hilarious. Maybe convince Blake to come out of retirement too and actually get the full push for Joe Dumars to make the play in and be like, "See, we're not washed. We can do it for you." Joe Dumars is just smiling ear to ear.
I feel like, I mean, obviously, I don't think Blake would actually ever come out of retirement, but I feel like if he ever would, that would be the situation to reunite with Chris Paul and DeAndre Jordan. Lob City Pelicans, man, I love it.
Can they get Matt Barnes out of retirement too? Call up JJ Redick, have him play a game on the coach from the coaching staff.
Well, the Redick one probably not, but the other ones, yeah, they could probably get. Yeah.
Tarnish his retirement. Like, where does he get his number retired if it's not with the Clippers? That's a big question. How does Chris Paul, one of the league's best point guards and influential ones, not have a retirement home? It's kind of sad to think about it in that end too. I think New Orleans would if LA didn't. Yeah.
Do they already have somebody wearing 3? Like, have they had somebody wearing 3 since he got traded? I actually
think they've already given it up, man. I think
Yeah.
Jordan Poole.
Wait. Yeah, I guess I don't think about it because it's the Pelicans,
That's
whereas
the
when he played there, it was the Hornets.
that's the other weird thing because it's like they're
Yeah,
a different team kind of.
technically, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, hey, guess what? I think the Clippers should be a different team. I think they should move to Seattle. I'm not even like kidding. Like this is a team. Let us not forget in the fall this came out about the money laundering thing, the circumventing the cap. I It's gonna take a long time to fully prove it, but I think there's enough evidence that's like beyond a reasonable doubt that this was something that happened with Kawhi and Steve Ballmer. There should be some penalties. I think there's a 0% chance that it happens, but it's like, get Steve Ballmer out of there. To me, it's like very clear that like he circumvented the cap, which to me should be like a cardinal sin. I'm sure it happens a lot, but the way he did it was just so obvious and just crazy. There's a 0% chance that they moved the team to Seattle.
I mean, the Clippers have always been doing this since back in the day. Donald Sterling moved them from San Diego to LA with no notice and didn't tell the commissioner and just said, I have the money, I'm going to do it. So the Clippers owners and general managers or whoever's been in control of the team just think with their own mind, go in that mind, and just do whatever best for them and their franchise. Don't really think about anyone else or everyone else around them. And that's clearly been a reason of how they've been so dysfunctional over these last at least 25 years I've been alive. Because like you said, one conference finals in those 25 years that I've been alive is pretty embarrassing.
That's crazy. Any closing thoughts on CP3 or anything else before we officially wrap it up?
Just hope he gets
That's
signed to another team and that we get to at least see him play one more game because I can't have his last points being versus the Washington Wizards in a random game. I can't have that.
I think he's gonna be Lakers bound because I also feel like there are going to be teams around the league who kind of also think like he shouldn't go out that way.
Mm-hmm.
So he might not play, but I I think that'll happen. And also, I mean, maybe overthinking this, but like I don't know, maybe Chris Paul could be another good mentor for Bronny. I don't know. I mean, I feel like LeBron is probably that good mentor for Bronny, but it can't hurt.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's going to the Lakers. I think especially like with the power that LeBron has still, and then the JJ of it all, I think he's bound to go cross town to LA, and he wants to stay in LA. It's gotta happen. He can't go out like this, man. I'd be devastated. And by the way, this CP3 jersey, this isn't like a one-time thing. It's staying up on the backdrop of the set. He's my goat, for sure.
Got to be mine too. He got me into basketball. Can't hate on him.
Exactly. All right, I think we're good to call it a show. Appreciate you boys hopping on again. But yeah, before we officially wrap up, I just want to give you guys a chance, as we always do, to plug some of your work, tell our listeners where they can find you guys at.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Eamon, for having us on once again. It was a blast doing this little game, kind of comparative to just the breakdowns we usually do. So if you do enjoy it in the comments, let us know. We'll definitely do more of that. And Eamon will do more on his channel as well as some other guests. But you can find me over on Bright Side of the Sun, where I write about the Phoenix Suns. And you can catch me out on YouTube, where I talk about the Suns on the Suns Planet Pod, and where I upload my videos on Switch City, talking about the NBA in general.
Yeah, and you can find me at seconds.com. I mostly write about the Pacers, but I also find a way to write about other teams, Pacers related. You got to go to the site to figure out what I'm talking about.
It's sweet. Appreciate you boys. Thank you guys for tuning in. Catch you guys on the next episode.
Appreciate it, man. Talk to you
Thank
then.
you so much. Talk to you later.
All right, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Cassels Cast. Once again, I'm Eamon Cassels. Make sure to go check out Bruce and Elie's work, and I'll catch you guys in the next episode.